Hi, picture this. You've been studying for the GMAT for 6 months, you book your test, and now it's test day. You appear for your test, and in the middle of nowhere, your worst nightmare comes true. Your test gets flagged for review. With that, welcome to episode 4 of GMAT Club series with Manhattan Prep. I'm Shreya Satish, and we have our star expert here, Stacey Prince, who's going to share everything we need to know if our test gets flagged for review. Now, um, we need to know everything that we can follow in order to make sure that we figure out a solution to this in the best manner possible. So that's the topic for today's session. And before we start, I want to quickly cover what we discussed in the last 3 episodes. We started with scoring algorithms. We then had a detailed conversation on official GMAT exams, mock exams, and again, how to use them in the best manner possible. And our third topic, our last session, was on the review changing features that we have, wherein we can change our answers for every 3 questions in each section. So if you want to make sure that you utilize this series in the best manner possible, go ahead, check out those sessions. The links are added in the chat box below. So without further ado, let's start. Now, I want to start with the first and foremost, most basic question that comes to my mind, right? How exactly does a test get flagged for review?
Yeah. So, and I want to say before we start, I'm so glad we're having this conversation because studying for any standardized test is nerve-wracking. Taking the test is nerve-wracking. And then when something like this happens, you think you're done, and then this happens, and it just stops your heart. So I do want to talk about it. Hopefully nobody listening will ever have this happen. But if you do, then we'll give you the tools to know how to take a deep breath, and it's going to be okay, and then how to handle it. So how can this happen? So first of all, some percentage of exams are randomly selected for review, meaning there's no reason at all that they're selected. This is just part of standard security procedures. They're always making sure that the test is secure. And that's actually really important for all of us, because if the test isn't secure, then our scores don't mean anything. So this is a standard part of any kind of standardized test like this, that they have to have security procedures and reviews. But if it's not a random situation, if it is based on something, then what could that mean? So the proctor during the exam could flag something, or there is actually AI software being used that's also watching you while you're taking the exam. So the AI could flag something. The software is essentially watching and listening to what's going on. And this could be a number of different things. There could be something that gets, like, the AI flags the proctor sees something, but they just address it in real time, and it never gets to the level of your test being flagged afterwards. And I'll give you an example of something that happened to me when I was taking the exam online the last time. I was working on some problem that was really hard, and I was kind of like doing this, and I was like, so, wrestling with this problem, and I started kind of sinking lower and lower in my chair to the point that my face was like not fully, visible in the camera. And the proctor came on and said, "Can you please sit up straight and like take your hand away from your face?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." And so I did it, and my test didn't get flagged or anything after that, but I was kind of like, "Oh, are they gonna flag me now? Do they think I left my screen or something?" So there could be things like that in the moment where the proctor will come on and tell you to do something or change something in the moment. And I think a lot of situations they catch them in the moment, so it never gets to the point of being flagged. So that's good. It's also could be the case that something happens. It might be the case that the software catches some noise in the background. They hear somebody talking or something like that. That's going to get flagged for review, which just means someone's going to go watch the tape afterwards, the recording of you taking the exam afterwards, and see, okay, was somebody talking to you, or did it just pick something up as somebody was walking by your window or something like that? It is also possible that GMAT themselves could flag a test for some reason. Obviously they don't talk about the security reasons why that might happen, but we're guessing that something like, if I went and took the exam a month ago and I scored 495, and then I took it again today and I scored a 705. I mean, if I were in charge of the test, I'd be looking at when that happened. I'd be making sure that that's still the same person taking the test both times, because that would be a very unusual increase. So the situations that are in place, or why you might get flagged, would be things that are either known things that you're not supposed to be doing, like you can't move out of the view of the webcam if you're taking the test online, or you can't use notes or your cell phone on the breaks, that sort of thing. Or I would guess something like an unusually high score improvement, something like that.
Okay. So even something generally considered to be positive, which is scoring a great score, could be a possible reason to, in fact, get my test flagged.
Yeah, I don't know. I doubt it's just if you get a grade score, period. I would say that it's if you have an unusual score change in a short period of time. Like it would be really unusual to lift your score 200 to 300 points in a month or in 16 days. So something like that might raise a red flag. They'd want to just go look at the video and confirm, yep, it was you both times that did this. It was really you who got the good score.
Okay. So again, now these are some general reasons for why this could happen, right? Apart from this, any more technical or from an academic perspective, let's say, depending on my answers, something about the way that I answered or the timeline which I followed, any of these reasons for why my test could get flagged?
So I don't know about that. And they don't disclose all the reasons why they might flag a test because that itself would be giving away security protocols, right? I
Right.
would be surprised if something like that is part of the review. And I'm saying I'd be surprised simply because we all have so many differences when we take one exam to the next, and everyone's experienced this who's taken 2 or more exams. So one day you could be more tired or you could get caught up on one question and then have to rush on the other questions or whatever. So there are so many differences in the patterns of how we take the test that I'm guessing that's not part of it. But again, they don't disclose that kind of information. So I don't know.
All right. And let's say that I do get notified stating that my test is flagged for review. From this point onwards, realistically speaking, how long could it take for me to find a resolution to this?
Yeah. So typically what will happen is if you do get this, you're going to get an email that says that your test was flagged. It's going to come within a day or two of taking the exam. So typically what happens is you take the exam today, you'll see your scores on the screen at the end, but they're called your unofficial scores. And then they
Right.
say up to a week, but within a few days, typically you get your official scores and then you're done. So what will
Right.
happen is before they send you those official scores, within a few days, they'll send you something that says your test has been flagged for review. And that your official scores may be delayed as a result. And in the same way that they say they have up to 7 days, I think, to give you your official scores, but usually they give us our official scores in like a day or two. So they say that they have up to 20 days to review your test if there's a test review, but usually it's within a week that they get back to you.
All right. Okay. And so you're saying that within a week they should be able to get back to me, and
That's the average. Obviously, it could change depending either on the complexity of the situation, if they're needing to do more investigations, or if for some reason they have a lot of reviews at that time, it could slow it down. So that's why they say that they can take up to 20
okay.
days. But the average that I've heard is actually less than a week. And
Okay.
when I say the average,
And
they have told me that. It's not just my own experience from our own students, but they have told me. My own experience with my own students who've had this happen, everybody has gotten a response in 5 days or less.
okay. So that's wonderful. That means less of an anxious period that you're spending wondering why it happened.
Yeah.
Okay. And are there any stats on percentage of flag tests that are cancelled or any other reason?
They don't. So again, they don't release any of that information. Again, that would be like breaking security to itself to tell us those kinds of things. What percent of tests get flagged or what percent of flagged tests get canceled. So they don't talk about that. Generally speaking, what's going to happen is if you have so first of all, they're going to tell you that your test was flagged. Then they're going to go and they're going to do their investigation and not. So what I'm about to say is just my own experience with our own students and not anything official in terms of stats or anything that they've told us.
Okay.
Most of the time, sometime in the next few days, they just get another email saying your scores have been released. It was good. It's fine. It's good. And so basically your test got flagged for some reason. Either it was a random flag or there was something that they needed to investigate. I once had a student whose cat got into their room somehow while they were testing.
Okay.
Cat was trying to get up on the table, and you know how cats like to get between you and your camera.
Okay.
So that obviously got flagged because something was interrupting the test.
Right.
Whoever reviewed that one started laughing when they saw the situation, and they were like, so that's, a couple days later, the student got an email that said, it's fine, here, your scores are released and it's fine. So there will be some things that happen sometimes like that where Again, they have to check because they have to make sure that the test is valid and that it's secure, but it's not a real violation or anything, and so it's fine. So in a majority of cases where our students have been flagged, it's been fine, and within a few days their scores have been released. We have had some students who have had their test scores canceled.
Okay.
In those cases, it's always been like there was an actual violation, and it was a mistake, but it was still a violation. And in a couple of cases that I can remember, the student picked up their cell phone on the break. And that's, we all know that that's against the rules. You can't look at your cell phone and you can't use your cell phone when you're on the break.
Of course.
Yeah. And just, this is why I tell people, don't even bring your phone. If you can, leave it at home or put it like in a bag, in another bag, like bury it so deep in your belongings that you don't, because we're so used to all just, oh, I have a break, let me pick up my phone and start.
Yeah.
You do it without even thinking about it. So if that happens, they are going to cancel your score because that is a clear violation. And so what typically happens in that, when there is something like that, where it is a clear violation, is they'll go and they'll look at the recording. They will come back and they will tell you that your score is canceled. And then in the cases where we've seen this happen, they also impose what they call a lockout period. So instead of waiting 16 days to take the test again, you have to wait longer to take the test again.
Okay.
In the cases that we've seen, people have been told they have to wait 31 days. So basically they have to wait an extra roughly 2 weeks before they can take the test again.
Yes.
And so, that's what you did. You did violate the rules, and, the rules were known ahead of time. So unfortunately, if that happens, yes, you have to wait longer than you otherwise would have. First of all, your score was canceled. And second of all, you do have to wait longer than you would have to go ahead and take the test again. And we did actually have this happen just a few months ago. With one of our students. He picked up his phone on the break. His exam was canceled. He got the 31-day lockout period. And then he went in, he waited till day 32, and then he went to the test again. And everything was fine on test day. He scored a 725. So very exciting.
Wow.
And then like 2 days later, he got the email that this test was flagged for review. And so we don't know. And so we don't know whether maybe it was flagged for review because of what happened last time. Maybe it was flagged for review because there was a big difference. I don't know what he scored on this first test. So we don't know why it got flagged for review again. But everything that I just said happened. He was told it could take up to 20 days. And in his case, he had a deadline. This was in January. So he had a deadline in 16 days.
Okay.
He was like, what do I do? I need this score by the deadline. So we talked to GMAC, and I want to mention, I've talked to multiple people in the security team on GMAC. I've talked to them multiple times. They absolutely don't want to cancel anybody's score. They are going to if there's a violation, because they take test security very seriously. And like I said, they should, because if the test is not secure, then none of our scores mean anything. But they're not looking to cancel people's scores. They actually have a lot of empathy for how nervous making this is and how stressful this is. They are thoroughly investigating. They're only taking action if they do have evidence of some kind of a clear violation, which is why the first time the student did have his test canceled, because he did clearly pick up his phone on the break. So for the second one, I emailed them and I said, no, this is happening with the student. We're not sure why, but he has this deadline. Is there anything we can do? Because the deadline is less than 20 days away. So they gave me an email address that I'm going to give all of you right now, that they said anyone whose test is flagged for review, you can email this email address. It's testsecurity@gmac.com. Maybe you can type that in the chat. So testsecurity@gmac.com. This is if your test is flagged for review. Don't use it for other reasons, but if your test was flagged for review, you can send an email. They will see it. You can tell them, for example, I have a deadline on this date. You can ask for, they explicitly said, you can ask for, can you give me an approximate timeline for the resolution for when you might get back to me to let me know. And they said they definitely do want to know things like, if you have an upcoming deadline, tell them what that deadline is. And so you can communicate with them in this process. You can also use that, by the way, to provide additional information. I've had cases where, so for example, with this case with the student who picked up his cell phone. You did pick up the cell phone, so you have to acknowledge, yes, I'm sorry, I picked up the cell phone. I know that that's not allowed. It was a mistake. I just did it mindlessly. I wasn't trying to cheat or anything like that. So you can give them additional information like that. Or in this case, the student didn't know, like everything seemed fine to them. They didn't think there was a problem. But they were able to give the additional information that the deadline was coming up, and so that they needed a response before that deadline. So just know that you do have that opportunity to communicate with them, either to provide additional information about whatever happened during the test, or to ask questions or ask for more information.
Okay, and now I think we've had a detailed discussion on everything that the institute does on their end, right? If a test gets flagged for review. But as an applicant, let's say that my test has gotten flagged for review. What are the steps, immediate steps and long-term steps that I need to now action once I have been notified of this?
Yes. Okay. So let's step through here's the checklist. First, this is going to be hard, but just take a deep breath. Take a super deep breath, let it go. Remind yourself that this might just be you were randomly selected. Again, they have to do some number of randomly selected test reviews just to ensure the integrity of the test. Second, think through what you experienced during the test. Is there anything that either could have been a violation, like you picked up your cell phone, or is there anything that could have appeared to be a violation or that they might have thought was a violation? And so as you're thinking this through, just type up some notes or take some notes, kind of think through everything that you can. If you think of something that either could have been perceived as a violation or that oh, actually that was not something I was supposed to do, what you're going to do is write out your case. You're going to explain, write it out. This is what happened. I wasn't intending to, do anything bad or wrong, but this was a mistake and I did this, or whatever it might be. And then you're going to send that to the email address that I gave you earlier. Also, by the way, if you're one of our students, please contact us. We will also help you with all of this. You don't have to remember all of this right now. You just contact us and we'll help you with all of these steps. So you're going to send an email to that email address, testsecurity@gmac.com. You're going to provide whatever additional context you can about what happened. And you can also then give them any other information. If you do have a deadline coming up, tell them your first deadline that's coming up. If you want to, and I would suggest that you do ask them, can you give me an estimate of the amount of time that it will take? They may just come back and give the same number, which is it can take up to 20 days, which is the official answer. But if you tell them, hey, I've got a deadline in 12 days, can you give me a timeline? Is it possible to get a response before then? You're at least alerting them, oh, they need to put your case higher on the priority list so that they can try to get you an answer before your deadline. So all of those things they're steps to take. It's not gonna make you feel okay. You're still gonna be nervous about all of this, of course, if your test does get flagged. And what I'll say there is essentially, if there was no violation, their investigation is going to show that there was no violation. They're not going to have any evidence or anything to point to say that there was a violation. And so your score is going to get released. If there was a violation, it's true in that case that your test might be canceled if it was a clear violation of something that's one of their rules. If it was clearly, though, just a mistake on your part, they're also going to be able to see that during the investigation. And so you will be able to, although that test score will probably be canceled, you will be able to go in and take the test again. So you'll still be able to get your score and you'll still be able to apply to and go to business school. It won't end everything. The only people I've ever heard of, this is very, very rare, when they catch people actually cheating, those people could in fact be banned from ever taking the test again. But that's something that you might read about that happening like once a year for a person. Like, it's extremely, extremely rare. And in that case, the only cases I've ever heard of, it's been very clear that it's been like to the level that they could sue take the person to court. They have that level of evidence that the person was actually cheating on the exam. So that doesn't happen unless you really were doing something wrong, which I assume nobody listening to this is doing.
Okay. So for instance, right, based on everything you've just said, let's say that this is the doubt that I have. Um, I get flagged, my test gets flagged for review, and then I clarify. Let's say that it was a mistake. For instance, nothing as serious as taking my mobile phone, but maybe it seemed like I was cheating, or there was somebody else, like you said in the cat case, right? But that was too obvious that it is a cat,
It was
so there's
a cat.
no way that the
The
person could
cat
be
was not
cheating.
helping her to take the test. I have
Yes. So
had other circumstances. There was another case a couple of years ago. Again, this was taking the test from home, where a student's child came into the room, and then
okay,
another adult in the household had to come into the room to get the child to leave the room. But all that wasn't in the view of the video. So all the video knew was they were hearing voices, and they were hearing an adult voice say something. And again,
okay,
it ended up being flagged, and the score was not canceled. The student explained what happened. So this is where you have the ability to give that context of what was going on, and the recording has video and audio. So if what you're telling them for the context matches then what they're seeing and or hearing in the audio, then that's going to explain it, and that's going to be okay. If somebody starts talking directly to you, especially if they're talking to you about anything related to the exam, that's going to be a cancellation, because that's just like picking up your cell phone. You're not allowed to do that. But if it's
okay.
something where it's an interruption that was not within your control, that should come through. And again, you'll have the ability to explain, but that should be apparent, because there is both video and audio recording of everything that happened.
Okay, so most cases, I mean, on an average, or like you said, right? So most likely it's just a misunderstanding, and we do get a chance to clarify. But again, to make it super clear for our viewers, is there a meeting invite that they set up with you, or does this communication happen only over email? And how exactly do we talk to them and explain ourselves? What is
Yeah,
the medium?
it's written communication. And again, I think that my guess is, I'm not a lawyer, but my guess is that that's for legal purposes, right? So that everything that's going back and forth, it's clearly
Recorded,
laid out.
yes.
What everybody said is very clearly recorded in
Right.
in writing. So it is written communication. You would use this email address, and they will communicate with you also via email. And again, you can email that email address as many times as you want and give them as much information as you want. I will also just say, this is true in general in life. Be nice, polite, speak calmly. Don't, be nice to people in life is a good rule in general. But in this
That is
situation,
true.
right? But in this situation, especially, just be polite and explain your case, and ask them if you have any questions, please ask me. If there's anything that you want, anything else that you want me to explain, please let me know, because of course we don't necessarily know exactly what it was that
Right.
caused us to get flagged. Again, they don't disclose that information for security purposes in the first place. So yeah, but you absolutely have the ability to communicate back and forth with them, and to in writing, and to lay out whatever information you think will be useful for them to know as they take a look at the recording and review the situation.
Okay. And from your inputs, right? It seems like, and this is something that I have observed even otherwise, is it just considered safer to appear for these tests at a proctored center and not from home? I think that's a very relevant question that all of us, because we want to appear for it from home because it's a comfort space. You don't have to travel. You want to avoid as many different circumstances as you can, and you want it to be a familiar space. So, but I believe that it's at home itself where most of these mistakes occur, or you're more likely to get in trouble. So
It's certainly, yes, I agree with you that being at home is a less controlled environment. So that's what it comes down to, right? If you're in a testing center, it's extremely controlled. Nobody can get in there except for the people who
yes.
are running the center and, putting you into the room where you're taking your test. And so in a testing center, it's a more highly controlled environment. When you are at home, you don't have that same level of control. And they, of course, can't see everything. In a testing center, there are still cameras recording you while you take the exam, but there are also employees at the company sitting there watching you, right? So it's just a more controlled environment in general. So it's true that there are more opportunities for something to happen
I
that
know.
might get your test flagged when you're taking the test from home. And actually, I do want to say too, your comment about, oh, we want to take it from home because it's a more comfortable environment. When you're thinking about where to take the test, I think the most important thing to think about is not actually the thing we were just talking about, which is because it's so rare for a test to get flagged. It really is. When you look at, the 100,000 students or however many a year who are taking this test. When you're looking at, should I take the test in a testing center or at home? It's true that taking it at home is more comfortable. The risk is that it's actually too comfortable. You actually want a little bit of nervousness on
Challenge.
test day, right? You want a little bit of like your heart going up, and because that helps, right? That helps you to have that energy and to pay attention and to focus more. If you have too much anxiety, then yes, that can derail your test. But you want a little bit of anxiety is actually a good thing to help us focus. So, I've taken the test obviously in a testing center and at home, and I found that at home I'm too relaxed. It's not good. I actually perform better personally in a testing center because I am in a slightly unfamiliar surrounding that helps keep me focused on the test. That's going to differ from person to person, obviously. And I do think somebody who experiences stronger test anxiety. So people who are maybe having physical reactions like feeling a little nauseous or dizzy or getting sweaty palms or something like that, those people might be better off taking it at home because the level of comfort at taking home might just bring them down to a normal level of anxiety instead of too much anxiety. But for someone who doesn't have that level of a reaction for performance anxiety when taking the test, consider don't just take the test from home because you're like, oh, I can just be sitting on my couch and it's easy. It might actually be too casual. You might actually benefit from being in the testing center in that case.
It also takes me back to the point where you mentioned that you seemingly were slouching on your chair, and the moderator came and he sort of like made sure that you were sitting upright. At home, there is nobody to really correct us, so there's a good in a center there are people just to watch us, so they might just help us in making sure that we're disciplined and we don't unnecessarily get in trouble. So I think that's one of the takeaways from this session. It's just better if you appear for the test from a center. And I was just going through a couple of questions, right? I believe that there's one that we could answer. Here's what it says. What if my score was flagged for review and it doesn't get reinstated? How do schools view these situations?
Yeah, so it depends upon what's going on. So typically what will happen is in your official record, it will show that you had a test that was canceled, but you don't actually have to send your whole official record any longer to schools. It used to be before the new version of the exam came out that when you wanted to send your scores, you sent essentially a transcript. And so it had all of your scores on it or all of your sittings for the exam. And now you choose what scores you want to send to schools. So if you take the test 3 times, you can choose to send your scores from your second test because that was your best test. So the schools don't need to know actually that you had a test that was canceled. Because there's no scores to send in that case, right? You're not going to send those results to the school. If there is ever a situation where someone is caught cheating and banned from taking the exam, in that case, the scores are any schools that you might have tried to send scores to are notified, but that's a totally different situation. And that's obviously a much more serious and much more rare situation. But in general, if they just discover, you know what, there was a violation, yes. And so we do have to cancel those scores, but we're still letting you take the test again, which means we know that you weren't trying to do anything wrong. We're still letting you go take the test again. Then that's it. You do have to go take the test again, and you do have to go pay to take the test again. But as far as schools are concerned, they don't even know.
Okay, so schools don't necessarily need to know about what's going on. Yeah. Okay, and I think there's one more question, but I'm not sure if it works this way. Can you get flagged even if you pass it in person?
There can be situations where someone gets flagged even in person. In fact, so the selfless situation I was telling you about before was somebody who'd taken it at home, but I had this happen a few years ago to a student who took it in the testing center on the break. Again, she was just mindlessly, she went out to her locker, she opened up her locker, she picked up her phone. Her phone was turned off. She'd listened to me that far. She turned off her phone. But it doesn't matter. As soon as you pick up your phone, that's it. It's a violation. So she picked up her phone and then she suddenly was like, oh, I can't do that. But it was too late. And so her test got flagged because the proctor saw her pick up her phone. They have to report it. It's part of their protocol. And so she did. Her score got canceled and she had to wait a month and then she was able to take it again. So yeah, this is why I say don't even make sure that your phone is just, you can't just mindlessly.
It's not around you.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. And I think those are the only two questions pertaining to this topic. And even otherwise, I believe we have covered everything. Something that I was just thinking of right now is that, so let's say that I submit my test right now. I will get my scores, like my immediate unofficial scores, right? Post that there's a...
At the end of the test. Yeah. On the screen, you get your unofficial scores immediately after the test ends. Then there's some process that, gets processed and checked and make sure that those are your official scores. And then it's typically a day or two later that you get the email saying that your official scores are available and you log into mba.com to see them. I have never heard of a circumstance in which someone's official scores like 2 days later are different than the unofficial scores that they've seen on the screen. I think it's just some kind of security procedure that they're doing to make sure that everything was transmitted correctly. But yeah, generally speaking, your unofficial scores that you see on the screen, those are your scores.
No, so for instance, I get my unofficial scores, and then after that also there's a possibility that my test gets flagged for review.
Oh yes, sorry, because your unofficial scores are happening immediately after the test is over.
Right. So immediately after, I'm led to believe that the exam is over and I'm passed and I have my scores, but there's a good chance post that. Okay, so
not a good chance, but yes. So maybe that's why it says unofficial too, right? Because it still could be the case that your test could be flagged for review. So yeah, typically what we've seen is that sometime in the next 48 to 72 hours after you take the test, that's when you would get the email if your test has been flagged. Okay,
so until I get my official scores, it's just better to not declare anything or okay.
Yes, when you get that email that says your scores are ready, log into.
That's the only time I know that it's
you're officially on your record and everything's good. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's mostly it. I believe that there's a follow-up question, but I'm not sure now. This could be, I believe it could change for school to school, but they're saying that there are some schools like Yale that asks you to disclose if you had a cancelled test. Is there a possibility?
Yes, a school can ask anything they want in their application. So yes, so a school could put a question in their application that asks you to disclose if you have had a canceled test. And so as with anything that a school might ask you, answer honestly. And if they do ask that question and you have had a canceled test, then most applications have a spot where you can add additional information. But at the end of the application, they'll say, is there anything else you want us to know? And so give them the context of whatever happened. So for example, my student who just in January, who had the test canceled from picking up their phone, would simply say, I accidentally picked up my phone on the break. The break. Well, you can't do anything on the break anyway, right? So I accidentally picked up my phone on the break. It was completely an accident. They recognized that and allowed me to retest. But yes, they did cancel the score because I had picked up my phone. And a school is not going to care about
that. Okay, all right. So I think that's fairly it. We haven't missed any questions. That's about it.
Okay.
So yeah. I think we have covered this topic extensively in detail. So for anyone who's joined us in the last couple of minutes, we had a detailed conversation on how exactly do we deal with a situation when our test gets flagged for review. What do you do? What is GMAT supposed to do? How long does it take to resolve a situation like this? And obviously how to not panic and remain calm. So these were a couple of topics that we discussed. And again, this is episode 4. Before this, we covered other topics like scoring algorithms, how to make the best use of official GMAT mock exams, and how do we best utilize the changing answers review feature that we have. So go ahead, check out all of those sessions, give us your feedback. You can also drop in any topics or questions that you have, which we could pick up later in the next session. But thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Stacey. And Yes. So with that, we'll see you for the next session and stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe, hit the like button for us, and thank you so much for joining.